Hello and welcome into the Skraby Show for December 3rd, 2025. Thank you for joining me. The Aztecs basketball team back in action tonight. I'm going to pay more, or I'm actually going to pay a lot more attention to the weeknight games because sometimes I'm doing this show and so the game starts and I'm on the way home or something like that. But I want to get more involved with the Aztecs basketball scene this year because I like Magoon Guath. I like Elsie Harrington. We talked to him on the show. So I am a big fan of some of those guys on the team. And they look pretty good against who did they beat last week? Why am I forgetting it? Or Oregon. They look pretty good against them. Now, Oregon's not the greatest team, but it was just nice that Michigan ended up beating everyone by 40 points. And so that is, it makes you feel better about your team when everybody gets beat by a team like Michigan. So they're going to be playing tonight against Utah Valley. Tonight on the Skraby Show, we're going to get into more of what Joe Musgrove said on Ben and Woods this morning. Also, there is, and I don't know if this is just a off-season edict or mandate that you have to just not make up, but you have to just talk about many different crazy possibilities that could happen in the baseball season or any sports really. But for the baseball season, people are really, really pushing Mason Miller as a starter next year. And I've already talked about this, but I have some audio that I'm going to play a little bit later from Dan Plesac. He was on MLB Network. This was a few days ago, so it's a little dated, but I think that we're just going to hear more about Mason Miller becoming a starter, especially when the Padres are short starting pitchers in their rotation. So I think this is an easy thing to put together, I guess, if you're a media member. We had AJ Cassavell on the show earlier from MLB.com, and he was basically saying, like, in a paraphrasing way, why fix what's not broken kind of thing. And I agree with that. So we'll get into a little bit of Mason Miller as the show goes along. But we're going to start with Joe Musgrove because Joe Musgrove is a great dude. And, I've learned all the players we talked to over the years, Joe Musgrove is a guy who's going to give you an honest opinion. So, not many of the Padres are cookie cutter answers. We get a lot of good answers from people, and Joe Musgrove is one of those people. And so when he does interviews and he talks about the Padres, I listen because it's interesting to get a little insight into what players are thinking in the clubhouse. But I found this question from Ben Woods very fascinating because I've never been a professional athlete, as everybody knows. But I do like to get into the mindset of a professional athlete. And Ben Woods asked Joe Musgrove if the ownership stuff distracts him at all. And the reason I was interested in this, because that's something that we don't really think about, is do players get caught up in the I can't say messiness, but do players get caught up in all of the news that's going around about what's going to happen with the team? And for someone like Joe Musgrove, who, was brought in by Peter Seidler, I'm sure that there are some feelings on his side about the team being sold or potentially being sold. But here's what Joe Musgrove told Ben Woods about whether or not the ownership stuff distracts him at all.
I don't know that affects me a whole lot as a player. Obviously there's desires that you have as a player. You want an owner that's willing to spend money and put a good product on the field and take care of people in the organization and do the things that the best organizations do. But as a player, you have such a small time in the game that regardless of what scenario I'm in, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to win because this is the only chance I have. There's a lot of what ifs and things you can, hope for, but this is the reality of what I have and the time that I'm playing, and I got to make the most of it. And I think a lot of guys in the clubhouse have the same approach when it comes to, who owns the team. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we would love to see happen, but that's out of our control. And you still have to go out and try to compete with who you got on your team and how the organization's run. So I think that's more how you view it as a player.
That is what I thought he would say, because we've talked about this aspect of being a professional athlete before, and that's that you have a very limited amount of time that you're able to be working at the highest level, and so you just have that little bit of time in your life. And in the end, it's going to be the minority of time in your life spent playing baseball, and so he has the right mindset. You can't pay attention to everything that's happening around you. You have to look forward, you have to move forward, you have to keep things moving for yourself, because if you get caught up in all of that different conversation, in all of the different rumors, then I could see a player get a thought in his mind like, man, the team might be sold. Am I going to be traded? Okay, well then I gotta, I gotta make sure I stay here, or whatever it is. But there is that thought in the back of their head, like there could be some changes. And so change, especially for me, is tough. And so I can understand why a sale of a team or ownership scuffle could affect the players on the team, but that's when those players need to keep that outside. That's when those players need to make sure that they do not let that negativity creep into their clubhouse. And I do think the Padres are pretty good at that. I do think over the last couple of years, there's not been too much negativity that has come out of the clubhouse. We haven't heard a lot from the players about players not getting along. And I know someone's probably saying, what about Fernando and Manny? That was a few years ago, more than a few years ago. And I think that Joe Musgrove is spot on here with just focusing on what he can control. I think Braden says all the time, he tells his football players control the controllables. And that's what Joe Musgrove is doing. He's controlling the controllables, which is something it took me a long time to learn in my life. It took me a long time to learn. Ant Sanchez on YouTube says, pay me $100 million. I'll be the nicest guy ever. I get it. But Joe Musgrove was a great dude before he got the $100 million. He came on our shows when he was playing in Pittsburgh. So he didn't have to do that. But anyway, Joe Musgrove. Wait, I have more Joe Musgrove. I also wanted to hear about his conversation with, I'm going to save the Joe Musgrove on Mason Miller converting to a starter for a little bit later, because we're going to talk about that more in depth. But I would like to get his thoughts again a couple weeks out. We had Joe Musgrove on Gwynn and Chris when it was the day of the news that Craig Stammen was going to be the manager. And so here is Joe Musgrove a couple weeks later, more time to think about things, more time to maybe talk to teammates. So Joe Musgrove was asked by Ben Woods what his thoughts now are on Craig Stammen as his manager.
I'm excited about it, man. I think everyone in this clubhouse knows Craig well. They know him as a person. They know him as a competitor and a player. And I think he's, recently enough removed from the game to still have a really good pulse on what's happening in the clubhouses and, the direction that the game's going. I think having Ruben by his side is massive for us. I think you guys have talked about it on the show a couple times, I've heard, but the hardest thing to do in baseball is manage a bullpen and manage a pitching staff. And I think having both of those guys at the helm of it is going to do a lot of good for the health of our guys and keeping them fresh and, maybe challenging our starters a little more than we did in the year past. So I'm super excited about it. The guys that I've talked to on the club are super excited. And, I think Craig's going to be, motivated to win and do big things in this role.
Yeah, that's the one thing I get from Craig Stammen, even as a player, is that excuse me, he's going to have to do it. He's going to do it the right way, because that seems like who Craig Stammen is as a person. I saw him being interviewed down in the Dominican League. He was watching a game. He was watching Luis Campusano. So, I mean, he's doing the things that Mike Schilt did. He's going to meet with players. He's doing the things that he needs to do. But I'm very, very, very interested in seeing how different pitching is managed in 2026, because you have a former pitcher, a former reliever as the manager of the team. I would think that his insight on being a reliever at the major league level for as long as he has will be really valuable. And so I don't know if it's going to look different. I don't know if it's going to feel different, but I would assume that there would be some differences in how he runs a bullpen versus other guys running, or Mike Schill or Bob Melvin running the bullpen. That's, the knowledge that he has from all of the years that he pitched. That's pretty invaluable, and you can't take that away. So that's something that he has over someone else. And again, for anybody who is suspect or is still thinking that the hire suspect, I get it. We're going to have to see it in action, but I urge you to at least give it a chance. And I know that Joe Musgrove's not going to come on and be like, oh, I hate this move. I hate this move. I hate this move. I hate this move. I think that all of the guys on the team, without talking to them, I think that they're just they just want to win, and they just want to do what they've been doing the last couple of years, making the playoffs, playing good baseball, and it's really on them in the clubhouse. The manager is an extension of them. And so the same players are in the clubhouse. They're going to have some more players added here, hopefully over the offseason. But I would guess that most of the players are kind of excited to play for not only a former player, but also a guy that they were teammates with just a couple years ago. So it's not new to them. Craig Stammen is not new to a lot of those guys. Manny was around for Craig Stammen, Fernando, Joe Musgrove, Jake Cronenworth. Those guys were all around for Craig Stammen. So it's going to feel comfortable, and there's continuity with Ruben Niebla. And you heard Joe Musgrove say it's huge to have Ruben Niebla by his side, because he's going to help with the learning curve that is being a manager. And over the Thanksgiving break, I talked to some people about the whole Craig Stammen situation. And I think people are more and more coming around to the idea of, okay, I can't control it, so let's see what happens. And that's all we can do. That's all we can do. Trevor says, I just hope Craig doesn't hesitate to pull a pitcher when us fans clearly know he doesn't have it tonight. Mike liked to leave guys in to see their moxie, in my opinion. That's an interesting thought. See, I think Craig wouldn't hesitate. I think Craig is going to know when he needs to change his pitcher. I think Craig's going to know when someone's telling him the truth of, yes, I can get this guy out. And when someone's saying, yes, I can get this guy out, but Craig knows that they just don't have it. I mean, there's things that he's going to see that we're not going to see, and I think he'll act on those things. I'm really interested to see how the bullpen and the pitching situation is managed coming up in 2026. So good job, Ben Woods, getting Joe Musgrove on the show this morning. If you want to hear more from that, you can go to 973thefansd.com, or you can go to YouTube, search Ben and Woods, and I'm sure that they have that up there as well. All right, when we get back, we're going to move into the Mason Miller conversation. Dan Plesac says he knows some people that know Mason Miller, and he has an indication of what Mason Miller wants to do in his career. So we'll talk about that when we get back on the Skraby Show on 97.3 The Fan. Back here in the Skraby Show, 97.3 The Fan. I'm Matt Skraby. Thank you for listening. You can watch the show if you would like on Facebook, 97.3 The Fan. You could also watch on the Skraby Show YouTube at the Skraby Show and 97.3 The Fan YouTube as well. And X, 97.3 The Fan SD is now broadcasting on X. And you could also listen on the Odyssey app. So make sure you go, if you're on the Odyssey app, make sure you look for my little chapters, because I chapter every single day, and I like when people mention that they like the title of the chapter. So if you do that, let me know if you like the title of the chapter. Before we get into Mason Miller, I need to say that you should join Tier 1 David J. from Hop Run Tours for an unforgettable trip to the Windy City next summer with Ben and Woods to watch San Diego take on Chicago at one of the most historic stadiums in all of baseball. This package from Hop Run Tours will include round-trip airfare, hotel accommodations for 3 nights at a 4-star hotel, a stadium tour, and tickets to 2 games, plus a group dinner with Ben and Woods. Visit 973thefansd.com/Chicago for all of the details. This special fan trip is brought to you by Hop Run Tours, who handles all the travel and event details. 97.3 The Fan is proud to promote this package. Again, 973thefansd.com/Chicago. I went to Wrigley 2 years ago. Yes, 2 years ago. And it was awesome. So if you've never been to Wrigley, actually, Adam and I were talking about this earlier. With the tour included and a 4-star hotel and airfare included and tickets to 2 games and a dinner with Ben and Woods. We didn't specifically talk about the dinner with Ben and Woods, but I mean, if you're going to get a Wrigley Field experience, this sounds like a pretty good deal, I gotta say. Because Wrigley Field, when I went there, I didn't really know what to expect, but we drove by, and it's really just sitting there on the city block, and then you walk inside, and it's like walking into Fenway, where you just kind of feel history, and you feel like when you're at Fenway, well, at least when I was there about 10, 12 years ago, they had some seats that were left from years ago. And so they were very narrow. And I thought that was hilarious that the seats were very narrow, because people in America, I guess, have changed in size over the years. But you just feel history. You see the Green Monster. You see, what is it, Pesky's Pole. You see all that stuff. And it just feels, you just feel like you're in a magical place, is what I'm trying to say. And singing Sweet Caroline with the Bostonians was pretty cool as well. But Wrigley Field, when I started to walk around the park just to see what was there, there's not much to see. There's not much to see. Most of the space, as you can tell, is taken up by the field. So there's not a lot of space, on the walkways. There's not a lot of space around the stadium, but they've done a pretty good job of putting in some nice seats and making the park fun. And this was the first time I walked in. I think it was the facial recognition stuff, because they didn't even make us go through any metal detectors or anything like that, or any lines. They just had us walk into the park, and we either got a yes or a no. So that was kind of crazy. Dominic says, bring the Skraby Nation out to Baltimore next year. Baltimore. I would go to Camden Yards. I would definitely. You hear that, bosses? I'll go to Camden Yards if you want me to go to Camden Yards. I'll do that. I don't know if they go. Did they just go to Baltimore this last year? I don't know if they go back to Baltimore in 2026. I'll have to check the schedule. All right. Mason Miller. Everybody wants him to become a starter. I personally want to see him stay as the closer of the team, because Robert Suarez is going to leave in free agency. And I say he is going to leave. I don't know that for sure, but it's likely that he does leave in free agency. But I was watching MLB Network in the break, and on the bottom, they're doing like these free agent watches. And it said Robert Suarez, free agent watch. And then it said leads MLB with, I believe the number was 72 saves over the last 2 seasons. Maybe it was a little bit higher. But it said he led MLB in saves over the last 2 seasons. And I know that sometimes watching Robert Suarez was frustrating, because I remember it was the Skrabinator game on May 12th against the Angels, where they were up, I think, 4 or 5 runs, and Robert Suarez struggled mightily. They ended up losing the game. That was extremely frustrating, for sure. I remember all of us Skrabinators were feeling good going into that 9th inning with the lead. Everybody was kind of packing up, getting ready to leave, and then boom, he gave up all those runs, and the Padres lose the game. I think there was a grand slam by what's his name? We talked about him all year. He was an Angels player. He hit a grand slam. It'll come to me. But anyway, why did we complain so much about Robert Suarez? Sometimes I look back on what we complained about, and I'm like, why did we complain about that so much? I don't understand why we complained about that so much. He was leading the league in saves. Yes, he gave up some games, but all closers do, and he did a pretty good job for the Padres. I think we're all just perfectionists, and I think that we all just want everything to go the way it's supposed to go. It's not like that in baseball. But why did we complain about Robert Suarez so much? I'm not sure. There were some stretches for sure, but overall, his time as a Padre was pretty good, I would have to say. Dominic says that the Padres are in Baltimore in 2026. All right, bosses. We're going to be having a meeting. Mason Miller, though. Dan Plesac on MLB Network was talking about Mason Miller. Here's what he said about him becoming a starter. Okay, here's what he said about Mason Miller becoming a starter. What is happening? This is embarrassing. Okay.
He wants to do. He would love
starter for the Padres. What do you make of this possibility? Mason Miller with that electric stuff as a starter for the Padres.
I do know this. I've talked to enough people that have talked about Mason Miller. It's something he wants to do. He would love to be a starting pitcher. And when you throw 98 to 101 like he does, and I thought when they acquired him, that being the Padres, he was about as unhittable as you could get the last couple of weeks this season. Nasty slider. He has a changeup that he didn't use that much coming out of the bullpen. I'm sure he'd like to explore adding that third pitch. So if you're 98 to 102 with a nasty slider, and it would give him time to work on that changeup, and he, along like Helsley, if you make this decision, this is what the Padres want to do, you could give him ample time where he could adjust his workouts and be ready to do this.
You saw the starting.
All right, so there you go. They're saying that Mason Miller, he's heard, Dan Plesac has heard that he would like to become a starter. And this is the question that we're going to be talking about all offseason. And again, my answer is no, don't convert him to a starter. I was talking to someone during the season at Petco Park, Kyle Glazer, formerly of Baseball America. I was talking to him, and I was asking him about starting pitchers versus relieving pitchers, and why certain pitchers can go from reliever to starter, and why some can not do that. And it's all about pitch mix. Well, not all about pitch mix, but it's a lot about pitch mix. You got to have a lot of good pitches that you could throw. Now, Mason Miller has 101, 102, 103 mile an hour fastball. He also has a deadly slider. But as you heard Plesac say, he's got a changeup that he didn't really use. So are two pitches, two really, really good pitches, and then one pitch that he's going to have to work on, is that good enough to be a starter? I don't know. Like, what happens when Mason Miller goes in a game and it's just not working for him? It's just not working for him because, high velocity guys sometimes struggle with command, and he would have a different mindset for sure. I don't think he would be throwing 104 on every single pitch, but I also don't think that people realize how difficult it actually is to throw over 100 over and over and over, and for 7 innings, say. Like, I don't know about that. I haven't done it, but you see guys throwing that hard, and you always see fatigue early. And so, again, I think when you're paying a guy like Mason Miller, and you're paying him nothing compared to his ability, you can get an all-star closer for, I can't say major league minimum, but close to major league minimum. instead of having to pay for like an Edwin Diaz or pay for Robert Suarez, you already have a guy who has proven to you and to everybody else, and even before he was traded to the Padres, that he can close games. Now, I saw this on the chat earlier, but I would actually really like to explore David Morgan becoming a starter. I feel like David Morgan last year showed that he has enough pitches and he can be a good pitcher. I would explore making him a starter over Mason Miller, because you're not going to make David Morgan the closer next year. It's just not going to happen. Like, if you go with Mason Miller as a starter, you could probably go with who else would be closer? Maybe Jeremiah Estrada. I mean, has he done enough in his career to be a closer yet? I'm not sure. I like Jeremiah Estrada. He has stretches where he's incredible, but he also has stretches where he struggles, and we saw it at the end of the year. A Money 1555 says on the chat, if I'm Mason, I'm walking if you try to make me a starter. I don't know if he is walking, but if he wants to do it, Ryan Helsley also wanted to do it. Jordan Hicks tried to do it with the Giants a few years ago. Didn't really work out. I don't know that Mason Miller is ready to be a starter, maybe down the line, but keep him at closer, please. You have a great closer already in place on the team, ready to go. And you pretty much know that when he comes in the game, he's going to blow 103, 104 mile an hour fastballs past guys, and he's going to make guys swing out of their shoes when he throws a slider. So, and not to mention the stress on his arm and on his body if he was a starter. Now, I'm sure they could figure that out. He's a young guy. He's also very tall. When I met him, I was surprised at how tall he was. But no, I'm not good with the idea of making Mason Miller a starter. I know other people are. There's other options for starter for the Padres. You know, I'm going to say a name, and it's not like a superstar name, but it was a name that we talked a lot about last year, and we talked a lot about right after the season ended. But that's Randy Vasquez. What step is Randy Vasquez going to take this year? And during this MLB Network video, they put up like a graphic of 2026 rotation options. And they have Kyle Hart, Joe Musgrove, Nick Pivetta, JP Sears, Randy Vasquez, Matt Waldron. Matt Waldron disappeared last year. I mean, Nick Pivetta, obviously, we can go with. Joe Musgrove, we can go with. Randy Vasquez, we can go with. Those three right-handed pitchers we know are going to be in the rotation. JP Sears, I'm not sure. I think JP Sears is going to be one of those guys, at least in the beginning of the year, that is up and down and spot starting, things like that. I don't think Kyle Hart's going to be a starter. I think that Kyle Hart is better out of the bullpen. I don't know that he has the stuff to be a starter. And we saw him at the end of the year be pretty good out of the bullpen. So I'm not sure that he's going to be a part of the rotation in 2026. Also, we have some time. Winter meetings are coming up. Things can happen. Brandon says Randy Vasquez, and then he corrected himself, and Brito, all of a sudden, the last player remaining from the Soto trade. That is wild to think about. It is pretty crazy to think about, I have to say, Brandon. All right. When we get back here on 97.3, The Fan, we are going to talk about... Oh, yeah, that's it. Oh, you know what I never did? Shoot. I almost said the other word. I didn't get a chance to play Joe Musgrove talking about Mason Miller becoming a starter. I just yapped for like 10 minutes when I had a professional pitcher's opinion. So when we get back, we're going to play Joe Musgrove talking about Mason Miller becoming a starter. Also, we're going to go to Joe Burrow and talk about what he said about Lane Kiffin today, because I love it. That's all next on 97.3 The Fan.
Quinn and Chris.
I have a mess of open tabs on my computer. You know, one day I think I should do a segment. I'm not sure if I can do it, but one day I should do a segment where at the end of the Skraby Show, I just list all of the tabs that I have open or questions that I've asked the Google machine over the last 5 hours or so, because there's some crazy ones in there. Like, I remember that one time when Chris and Tony told me that horses don't sit down, and I Googled a bunch of horses sitting down because they were wrong and I was right. Question from the chat. Johnny Brito, is he going to be back in 2026? I have not seen any official word on it. He got UCL brace surgery in May of this year, so they're thinking that he could be back for some of the early stages of the season. But honestly, honestly, I don't think that he's going to be back before the All-Star break unless something miraculous happens. But I would think they're going to take their time with him. I would think that they would 100% take their time with him because he can. I mean, he has all the makings of being a great pitcher, but he needs to put it together is what it all comes down to. All guests on 97.3 The Fan join us on the David P. Shapiro Fan Hotline. David P. Shapiro, criminal defense attorneys, helping good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime since 2010. Visit davidpshapirolaw.com. All right, Joe Burrow. I, am a fan of Joe Burrow for multiple reasons, but I really think that some of the things that he says are great. Like when he was playing, or that he was about to play in the Thursday night football game before or on Thanksgiving, and they asked him, "Hey, your team's kind of out of it. Why do you want to play tonight? Because your team's kind of out of it." And Joe Burrow said that he wanted to play because the fans pay good money and he likes playing football. I think that is a perfect answer. So, a guy who won a national championship with LSU, Joe Burrow. I'm sorry, I'm trying to put this video up on the stream and I'm just struggling mightily with doing it right now. But Joe Burrow was asked by the Cincinnati media. Oh gosh, I have a inception of things happening right now. All right. Joe Burrow asked by the Cincinnati media to give his thoughts on Lane Kiffin being hired at LSU. And then they kind of had to figure out, sorry, this is a disaster. I can't show the video for some reason. It's just not happening. So here is what Joe Burrow said. And he had some follow-up questions, which I thought were interesting.
I think he's a good coach. I guess we'll see how it goes. Those are my thoughts.
Did Lane ever recruit you at any point in time?
No.
Could you imagine playing in college football playoff or getting ready to and your coach leaving?
Is Ole Miss going to make the playoff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly not an ideal situation. But does the rest of the staff stay or do they go too?
I think you let the OC loose to go be a play caller.
Yeah, certainly not an ideal situation for a playoff run.
All right. So can anybody tell me if Joe Burrow hates Lane Kiffin or just doesn't care about Lane Kiffin? I'm not sure if he hates him or he doesn't care about him. I think by the question, did he ever recruit you? And he said no. Maybe that was a little indication that Joe Burrow doesn't like Lane Kiffin. But I find it very interesting that Joe Burrow is so locked in on football. He's not even paying attention to college football. He doesn't know what's happening. And I like that in my quarterback. If I had a quarterback, I would want him to not know anything about the outside world. But Joe Burrow asked a really funny question, because when you think about Lane Kiffin leaving to go to LSU, you don't really think about the former coaching staff. So he asked, is the rest of the staff going? Like, that's a big deal. I think that's a big deal. But anyway, I wanted to bring up this Joe Burrow thing. My video did not really work out, but I do think Joe Burrow was throwing a little bit of shade right there at Mr. Lane Kiffin. I can sense some hostility there. Anybody has any thoughts, you can go to the chat and let me know what's going on. All right. Matt Skraby Show, 97.3 The Fan. We are coming down to the end of the show, and we're going to have a daily gripe. I have one. I promise I have one. We'll do that in a little bit. But this whole thing with Chris Paul is very strange. Now, we all know that Chris Ello does not like Chris Paul for, I guess, the way he's handled himself in the past. But this whole thing of him being sent home at 3 a.m. in the morning is kind of crazy. I don't know, like, if there was a major blow up or something like that. That's the only thing I can think of in this situation. So if you're not sure, or if you don't know, the Clippers were in Atlanta to play the Hawks today, or they flew in early this morning, and they informed him just before 3 a.m. Eastern that he was being sent home. And they are it seems like they're kind of being, it seems like they're using Chris Paul as a scapegoat, because they're 5-14 on the season so far. They're one game into this 5-game road trip, and it's a very, very weird timing to send him home one game into the road trip. But here's what I've heard over the years, and I am not saying that this is fact, but I have heard Chris Paul is extremely, extremely difficult to work around. And again, I don't have any firsthand experience, but over the years at Super Bowl Radio Rows, talking to different reporters and asking people in the know about certain players, like, what's this guy like? What's that guy like? It's always, Chris Paul is always difficult to work with. It's not that he's mean. It's not that he's like a huge jerk or anything. He's just difficult to work with. And I really just don't have time for that anymore. I don't have time for people to, and I can't specifically pin this to Chris Paul because I don't know exactly what happened, but I really am tired of people who just think they're better than everybody else. And that's the kind of the feel that I get from this situation. And the only reason that you let someone like Chris Paul go, by the way, Chris Paul signed with the Clippers, announced that he was going to retire after the season. So this was supposed to be kind of his swan song year. That's a hard word for 2 words for me to say. Swan song year, where he goes and he retires, and everybody, it's just a nice, fun last season of his career. Well, it's not fun when you're 5-14, but a lot of the pundits, sports pundits, NBA pundits out there are saying that this is like one of the worst ways to dismiss a player from a team, and dismiss a player from a team who has as much equity in the NBA over the years as Chris Paul does. I'm assuming that we're going to find out more, and there was some sort of fight or something, not actual fight, but there's some sort of argument. Things got too far. They were like, finally, no, we don't want you on the team anymore because you're detrimental to the team. I think we're going to find out a little bit more here, but I have to say, like, Clippers, unless he was like punching people, I think you can wait a little bit to let him go. I mean, even if you know you're going to let him go, I don't think you do it at 3 a.m. I don't think you let someone who's probably going into the Basketball Hall of Fame, I don't think you let him go at 2:30 a.m. on a tarmac after some plane trouble getting to Atlanta. I don't think that's the best way to go about it. I would like to see a team, even if things got bad between each side, I would like to see the team be above the fray and, do the right thing. Even if I don't mind if they cut him or release him or whatever. I don't mind. Just because he's in his last year of his career doesn't mean that he gets to stay on the team just because. He has to be contributing. But if he's someone who's being a detriment to the team, then I can understand why they would get rid of him. And they did in a very public and weird way. So more will come out about this. And a lot of criticism is being sent Kawhi Leonard's way because Kawhi Leonard, I don't want to I'm not bad mouthing him. He's an Aztec. He has won 2 NBA finals with 2 different teams. I mean, he's a great basketball player, but he just doesn't play enough for me if I'm on that team, and I don't even know if this is a thought, but it's like, man, this guy is getting all of our money and he's not contributing at all. Like James Harden isn't even a question anymore about, his commitment. But Kawhi Leonard misses a lot of games. And Kendrick Perkins said that Kawhi signing with the Clippers is going to set the Clippers back 15 years. Now, I don't know if they're going to be set back 15 years, but it does seem like the money that they invested in him, this whole scandal with the pay him to do nothing thing has been going on. And it seems like the Clippers are just one big mess right now. So what are they? 5-14. The Clippers, 5-14. Kawhi Leonard, so that's 19 games. He's played 11 games this year, but he's almost missed half of the games, just over half of the games. But I don't know. I can't say that he's the worst superstar in the history of the NBA. I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to say that he's ruined the Clippers for 15, 20 years. Can't say that either. But I can say I would, because last year he played 37 games. He hasn't played more than, in 2023, he played 68 games. Other than that, the last time he played 70 or more games was in 2016. So it's just a weird situation. It's unfortunate because Kawhi Leonard is a good representative of San Diego, and I don't like that the criticism is happening. But when your best ability is your availability and you aren't available, things get a little weird.
What's annoying Skraby today? Let's find out. It's time for the Daily Gripe.
All right. Dominic said on the chat something that I thought when I found out Chris Paul got, cut at 3 a.m. at the airport. Dominic says, well, at least he was already at the airport. No joke. Thought the same thing. I was like, well, that's kind of easy for him. You can just hop on a flight and go home. My daily gripe today is something that happened this morning when I was getting ready for the day. Got my coffee, sat in front of my computer, and I was starting to check out the news. It's actually around the time that I found out about the Chris Paul thing. Checking out the news, just kind of sitting there reading some stuff. And my dog Lucky comes in and he wants to say hi. And he's a big dude. He's 95 pounds and he's very tall. And as he was turning around to leave, his big old tail smacked my coffee cup. And the coffee went everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Like there's this little desk thing that, is sitting on top of another desk. All of the coffee was under the desk thing. All of the coffee was all over the papers I had. And I couldn't be mad at Lucky. It wasn't his fault. But my daily gripe is, man, was that a mess. Cleaning up, daily gripe, here it is. Cleaning up liquid messes or messes in general before 8 a.m. is not good for the mental health. I will tell you that. I'm not going to blame Lucky, though. All right, we're back tomorrow. Tony's out for the next couple days, but Chris and I will be back for you tomorrow before Thursday Night Football. Have a great night, everybody.
Every group